Hello, today we're going to talk about FIFRA and regulations. And these are pertaining to the particular states that we service, giving us the guidance that we need in what to both look at on a label, products to use, and compliance. Now, we follow compliance with our vehicles, applications, and everything based on California law. Even though we are currently in California, they're the strictest one. And according to Natura and Proterra, we want to go above and beyond in our compliance and protection of the environment, our employees, and the people that we service. So FIFRA is policed or worked with through the EPA. And what this does, it gives us the documentation and the guidance to be able to know specifically what goes on a label, how it's to be interpreted, used, and the way that the product is used. The EPA then takes that information and they police that. So what is FIFRA? Excuse me. It's the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act. And it dictates who can apply products, who is going to apply products, what are the areas they can apply them to, what is the method they can use, where they can be applied as a spay spray, where they can be applied as a crack and crevice, where they can be applied as some type of broadcast, and then when they can be applied. Can they be applied all year round? Do they have to wait 2 weeks in between? And how they can be applied. Is it by crack and crevice only, by duster, by spay spray, fogger, whatever it might be? All of this is dictated through FIFRA on the label. So manufacturers, when they're putting together a label in their products on how they use them, they go to FIFRA to see how they have to write this. And that's what this is designed for. The Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act was enacted as the Federal Insecticide Act in 1910. Prior to this, you could sell just about anything off of the back of a wagon or out of any location without any requirements for making sure that what you're saying is in the package is actually there. So people from the old standpoint of being a snake oil salesman would sell products guaranteed to get rid of roaches or rodents or whatever it might be. And oftentimes it may not have the active ingredient it says, or if it did, it may also have some really toxic materials in addition to it. Then in 1947, after World War II, the government said, wait a minute, there's a lot of these products that were invented primarily as chemical warfare that are coming out now and being used in pest control. So we need to redo some of these requirements and expectations and really lower the amount that people can be exposed to. And then in 1972, about the time that the EPA and OSHA were created, they specifically then changed it into what they call FEPCA. And that was another amendment to the FIFRA law. We still refer to it as FIFRA. The amendments just have different designations. It was established to register pesticides, and only a few of these are going to be made available to the general public. So of all the products that are out there, the public can still get basically the same thing, but the inert ingredients or the way that it's used may be different. And so that will give it a specifically can only be used by a professional's designation. The EPA has a different review process. Anytime you use an antimicrobial, if you're using a biopesticide, such as a bacteria or an insect growth regulator, And then regular pesticides that would be considered nerve toxins or inorganic materials. States may also have their own laws. California, New York, Massachusetts are three of the ones that have additional requirements for manufacturers anytime they're going to be selling in their state. So they take the FIFRA, they take the federal law, and they add to it to make sure that they're protecting their people. So why was this put together? In 1947, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act was enacted. It was enacted to protect farmers from manufacturers that were using arsenic and lead-based insecticides that came about after World War II. Prior to World War II, they didn't have these, and they weren't used in the abundance that they were after. World War II saw the advent of chlornicotinols, of halogenated hydrocarbons, of organophosphates and carbamates, and all these type of products that work directly on the nerves. And increased exposure then could create issues with nerves. They define pesticide as any substance or mixture of substances intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating a pest. Basically covers everything. If it affects the pest, whether it's where they live, what they eat, how they harbor in a drain, how they hide out, if it affects in any way, it's considered a pesticide. Any kind of devices or instruments that are used to trap or kill the pests, not including the equipment used to apply it, are also regulated, and they have to be registered. So that would be things like traps, snap traps, things like that. Generally going to be something lethal that they have to have some type of registration for. One of the things that they are able to deal with in FIFRA is chemical classes. So any of the old technologies prior to World War II would be things that they would be taking a look at. Mostly botanicals like red squill, arsenic, some of these things. Then the pyrethrins came along, and they are generally have been around for thousands of years, but started to get synthesized and used in a much more regular method. Raid, Black Flag, several of these aerosol materials are basically pyrethrin. And then we had the chlornicotinols that were always around for the last 50 years, but started to really be synthesized and used for specific pests. In this case, more hymenopterans, but can work on other things too. And then the inorganics, which are the things that we might use, such as amorphous silica gel, or diatomaceous earth, or boric acid, mostly dusts, things that are not really nerve agents. And the pyrazoles, the fipronils, the material that would be included in like Termidor that worked completely different on an insect. And they're nerves, but more not directly on the nerve, but maybe where the electron movement from one point to another on a nerve is being sent. It would either affect the way that it's being sent or the way it's being received. And then there's other chemical classes out there, bacterial, fungus, all these that are under their own chemical classes, but are completely natural. Section 14 of FIFRA covers distributing, selling, or delivering unregistered pesticides, making any advertised claim about a pesticide. We see this a lot with cedar oil and some of the essential oils. Selling any registered pesticide that doesn't conform to the label, falsifying test-related information, selling an adulterated or misbranded pesticide. A couple of years ago, there was some people that were putting product into milk jugs, mixing it and selling it out of back of cars, and it ended up being extremely toxic. Detaching, altering, or defacing any part of a label and then selling the product or keeping it on your truck. refusing to keep records, making a guarantee other than that's on the label, advertising a restricted use product without giving the product classification, making restricted use product available to non-certified applicators, and using any pesticide in a manner not consistent with the label. So you can see it's very detailed and very strict on what you can and can't do, and it covers a large area. And one of the things that you have to look for is making sure that you don't cause a violation or violate FIFRA or any of the laws, because they can hit you with some pretty heavy fines. Civil penalties, not more than $5,000 per offense. So that means if you've gone out and applied this in a way that you knew was wrong and applied it at 5 different places, that's 25 grand right there. Any violations are looked at as being misdemeanors, primarily expecting that you might have done this by accident. But if you're a private applicator, which would be a farmer, and you did it on purpose, then you're looking to $1,000 fine and possibly 30 days imprisonment. Commercial applicators, 25 grand in a year. And if you're actually a manufacturer, you could end up with a $50,000 fine and up to 1 year imprisonment. So it's very important that you know and understand what the label says and apply it directly, just as that calls for. Enforcement is done by the EPA, but the state also can enforce through the Agriculture Department. So they're allowed to, based on the permission given by the EPA, to be the enforcers of this. So some definitions you have to know whenever you're reading or using the label and FIFRA. RUP stands for restricted use products, means it can only be used by a licensed pest control operator. General use means that it can be used by the homeowner also. A residual is something that leaves the deposit of material available for the insect or pest once it's dried. Contact means, obviously, whatever it hits, it will kill. Hazard means the potential to cause harm or illness. And toxicity is the level at which it could cause it. And last but not least, the signal words, warning, caution, or caution, warning, and danger. And these are all things that are explained in other reference materials. It would be important to understand these from a general use, but also to be able to explain to a customer about why and how we apply based on the label, which is based on a federal law. Here in 2 areas that we do mostly our treatments at. One is the state of Nevada, and that's covered by the Nevada Department of Agriculture. And they can do inspections at any time. They could pull you over at any time, take samples of what you're using. Plus, they can also take samples of what the product is that's there. And also in Washington, same thing holds true. Washington and Nevada, both their agriculture departments exist to try to make sure that their people that live there are being protected from unscrupulous companies. We always want to err on the side of caution. We'll always use products that are more environmentally sound, that are kid and pet friendly, meaning that the application is not going to be causing harm to any of the kids that are there, any people, or any of the pets. So that's it. Make sure that you read the FIFRA portion, the label and registrations, understand the labels, and understand how they apply to how you're going to be doing your service.